The woman's voice cracked. Tears streamed down her face as she covered her mouth with trembling hands. The studio, usually filled with ambient noise and whispered conversations, fell into complete silence. Dr. Phil stood frozen, his eyes locked on her, and then he did something no one expected. He turned to the production crew, raised his hand, and said firmly, "Stop the tape." The cameras didn't cut. The audience didn't move. For a moment, time itself seemed to pause. What had just been confessed on that stage was so raw, so devastating, that even the most seasoned television professional in the room knew this was no longer just another episode. This was a moment that would change lives. But to understand how we got here, we need to go back to the beginning. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. 3 days earlier, a couple named Sarah and Michael had walked into the Dr. Phil studio with what producers thought would be a straightforward marital conflict case. They'd been married for 30 years, had raised 2 children together, and from the outside, appeared to have the kind of stable, comfortable life many people dream of. But beneath that surface, cracks had been forming for years. Sarah was 52, a former elementary school teacher who had dedicated her life to her family. She had kind eyes that carried the weight of years of unspoken pain. Michael, 54, was a regional sales manager who traveled frequently for work. He had the polished demeanor of someone who'd spent decades convincing people to trust him. The intake interview had revealed the usual complaints: communication breakdown, growing distance, feelings of being taken for granted. The producers had seen hundreds of cases like this. They scheduled the couple for a standard taping, expecting Dr. Phil to deliver his trademark tough love advice, offer some counseling resources, and send them on their way to rebuild their marriage. But Sarah had a secret. And that secret was about to detonate in the most public way possible. When they walked onto the stage that morning, the audience applauded politely. Dr. Phil greeted them with his characteristic directness, settling into his chair with the case file in hand. He'd reviewed their story the night before, made his usual notes, prepared his approach. "So," Dr. Phil began, his voice measured and calm, "you've been married 30 years. That's no small accomplishment. But you're here because something's broken, and you want help fixing it. Sarah, let's start with you. What's really going on?" Sarah looked at Michael, then at Dr. Phil, then down at her hands folded tightly in her lap. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I've been lying to him for 27 years. The studio audience shifted uncomfortably. Michael's face went pale. Dr. Phil leaned forward slightly, his experienced instincts telling him that whatever was coming next was going to be significant. "Tell me about that," Dr. Phil said, his voice softer now, gentler. Sarah's hands began to shake. "Our son, Daniel, he's 26 years old. Michael thinks Daniel is his biological child. But he's not." The air seemed to leave the room. Michael's mouth opened but no sound came out. Members of the audience gasped audibly. Dr. Phil's expression shifted from professional curiosity to deep concern. Dr. Phil paused mid-sentence. The studio went completely silent. "Michael had no idea?" Dr. Phil asked, though the devastation on Michael's face made the answer obvious. Sarah shook her head, tears now flowing freely. "I got pregnant during a brief separation we had early in our marriage. Michael and I had broken up for 3 months. I was angry, hurt, and I made a terrible mistake. When we got back together, I realized I was pregnant. I didn't know. I wasn't sure whose baby it was. But I convinced myself it was Michael's because I wanted it to be. I wanted our family back so badly." Michael finally found his voice. "You've known this whole time?" His words came out strangled, broken. "For 27 years, you've looked at our son and known he might not be mine?" "I didn't know for certain," Sarah said, her voice desperate. "I convinced myself I was wrong. That Daniel was yours. That my timing had been off. But 3 months ago, Daniel did one of those ancestry DNA tests. For fun. Just out of curiosity about his heritage." Dr. Phil's jaw tightened. He knew where this was going. The results came back. Sarah continued, barely able to get the words out. And they showed genetic markers that didn't match Michael's family. Daniel came to me, confused, asking questions. And I had to tell him. I had to tell our son that the man who raised him, who coached his little league teams, who taught him to drive, who walked him down the aisle at his wedding last year, might not be his biological father. Michael stood up abruptly from his chair. Might not? You still don't even know for sure? I contacted the other man, Sarah said, her voice breaking completely now. He agreed to take a paternity test. The results. She reached into her purse and pulled out a sealed envelope. Her hands trembled so violently she nearly dropped it. The results came back yesterday. They're in here. I haven't opened them. I couldn't do it alone. She held the envelope out toward Michael, but he stepped back as if it were on fire. That's when Dr. Phil stood up and walked to the center of the stage. He looked at Sarah, at Michael, at the envelope trembling in Sarah's hand, and then he turned to face the cameras directly. Stop the tape, he said clearly. Then, louder, looking toward the control booth. Cut the cameras. Now. The production staff hesitated for a moment, unsure if he was serious. Dr. Phil in his 30 years of television had almost never stopped a taping mid-show. But his expression left no room for debate. I mean it, he said firmly. Turn them off. The red recording lights on the cameras flickered and went dark. Dr. Phil turned back to Sarah and Michael, his voice dropping to a tone that only they and the live studio audience could hear. This moment right here is not for television. This is for you, for your family, and for your son. What's in that envelope is going to change everything, and you don't need cameras watching when you find out the truth. He walked over to Sarah and gently took the envelope from her shaking hands. With your permission, I'm going to have my team reach out to Daniel right now. He deserves to be part of this moment. Not on camera. Not as entertainment. As family. Sarah nodded, unable to speak. Michael sank back into his chair, his head in his hands. Off camera, Dr. Phil made a choice no producer expected. He turned to his senior producer standing in the wings and spoke loud enough for the studio audience to hear. Get Dr. Frank Lawless on the phone. Tell him we need him here immediately. Then contact Daniel and ask him if he wants to come to the studio. Make it clear this is his choice, no pressure, but his parents are here and they need him. The audience sat in stunned silence. Many were crying. This was no longer a television show. This was a family in crisis, and they were witnessing something deeply human and profoundly painful. Dr. Phil pulled up a chair and sat down directly in front of Michael and Sarah, close enough that their knees almost touched. His voice was gentle but firm. Michael, I need you to hear me right now. What Sarah did was a betrayal of trust that cuts as deep as any betrayal can. You have every right to be angry, hurt, devastated. But right now, in this moment, we need to focus on what comes next. Because regardless of what's in that envelope, Daniel is your son. Not biologically maybe, but in every way that matters. You raised him. You loved him. He loves you. That doesn't disappear because of DNA. Michael looked up, his eyes red. How am I supposed to process this? Everything I thought I knew about my family is a lie. It's not all a lie, Dr. Phil said. The love is real. The memories are real. The bond between you and Daniel, that's real. What Sarah did was wrong. Deeply, fundamentally wrong. But Daniel didn't do anything wrong. And he's hurting right now too, Michael. He found out his whole identity was built on an uncertainty. He's questioning everything about himself. Sarah spoke through her tears. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know what I did was unforgivable. But I need you to understand, Michael, I never stopped loving you. Every day of our marriage I loved you. I made a terrible mistake, and then I was too afraid to tell you the truth because I knew it would destroy everything. So you let me live a lie instead, Michael said, his voice hollow. Dr. Phil held up the envelope. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to wait for Daniel to get here. The three of you are going to open this together, privately, in my office. Not in front of cameras. Not in front of an audience. Just the three of you, with me and Dr. Lawless present to provide immediate support. Because whatever this says, you're going to need each other to get through it. 45 minutes later, Daniel arrived at the studio. He was 26, with his mother's eyes and a facial structure that, honestly, could have belonged to either potential father. He looked terrified. Dr. Phil met him at the door and spoke with him privately for several minutes, explaining what was happening, making sure Daniel understood he didn't have to participate in any of this if he didn't want to. But Daniel said he needed to be there. He needed to know. But what happened next is something no one in the room, or watching at home, saw coming. They gathered in Dr. Phil's private office off the stage. The room was quiet, comfortable, with soft lighting and a couch where the three family members sat together. Dr. Phil and Dr. Lawless, the show's psychological consultant, sat across from them. Dr. Phil held the envelope. Before we open this, I want to say something to all three of you. Daniel, son, you are not defined by what's in this envelope. Your identity is not determined by biology. It's determined by love, by choices, by the man you've become. Michael, you are Daniel's father in every way that matters, regardless of what this says. And Sarah, you're going to have to live with the consequences of your choices, but you're also going to have to find a way to forgive yourself, because carrying this guilt for the rest of your life won't help anyone. He paused, looking at each of them. Are you ready? They nodded, holding hands, Daniel in the middle between his parents. Dr. Phil opened the envelope slowly, unfolded the paper, and read it silently first. His expression was carefully neutral, giving nothing away. Then he looked at Michael. The test shows that you are not Daniel's biological father. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Daniel's face crumpled. Sarah let out a sob that seemed to come from the depths of her soul. Michael closed his eyes, and for a long moment, no one spoke. Then Michael did something that stunned everyone in the room. He turned to Daniel and pulled him into a fierce hug. You're my son, Michael said, his voice choked with emotion. Biology doesn't change that. You're my son. You've always been my son. And you always will be. Daniel broke down completely, sobbing into his father's shoulder. Sarah watched them, her own tears flowing, a mixture of relief and anguish on her face. Dr. Phil's eyes were wet. In 30 years of doing this work, he'd seen thousands of dramatic moments, but this was something different. This was pure, raw humanity. This was a father choosing love over pain, choosing his son over his ego, choosing family over biology. Dr. Lawless leaned forward. What you're doing right now, Michael, is one of the most courageous things I've ever witnessed. The easy path would be to walk away, to feel betrayed and angry. And you have every right to those feelings. But you're choosing something harder and more powerful. You're choosing to be a father. Michael didn't let go of Daniel. He's my boy, he said simply. Nothing changes that. They sat like that for a long time, all three of them holding each other, as years of pain and love collided in that small room. When they finally separated, Dr. Phil handed Michael a business card. This is a family therapist who specializes in exactly this kind of situation. You're going to need help navigating what comes next. All three of you. This isn't something you can just push through alone. Michael took the card, nodded, and looked at Sarah for the first time since the results were revealed. We have a lot to work through. I don't know if I can forgive you yet. But for Daniel's sake, I'm willing to try. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. That's more than I deserve. No, Dr. Phil interjected. It's exactly what all three of you deserve. A chance to heal. A chance to rebuild. A chance to be a family again, with truth as the foundation this time. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. Later that day, after the family had left the studio, Dr. Phil sat alone in his office, the empty envelope still on his desk. His producer knocked gently and entered. That was... She started, searching for words. That was why we do this, Dr. Phil finished. Not for ratings. Not for drama. But for moments like that when someone chooses love over pain. When a father proves that being a dad has nothing to do with DNA and everything to do with showing up, day after day, even when it's the hardest thing in the world. He picked up the envelope and placed it in his desk drawer, a reminder that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop the cameras, step away from the show, and just be present for another human being in their darkest moment. Because that's what really matters. Not the production. Not the ratings. Just the people. And Michael, Sarah, and Daniel? They started therapy the following week. The road ahead would be long and painful. Trust, once broken, doesn't rebuild overnight. But they showed up. Together. As a family. That's the power of choosing love. That's the legacy of a father who understood that DNA doesn't make you a parent. Love does.